Good afternoon. You're on the West Coast. Good evening if you're on the East Coast. I'm from Portland with World Oregon. My name's Tim DeRoche. I'm the Director of Programs here. And I'm very, very excited to be here with our dear colleagues at the World Affairs Council of Connecticut. We've got Abby and Amanda and Megan Torrey. And we are very, very honored to have with us today Ambassador Charles Shapiro, who's going to walk us through the what's next of what's next with Venezuela. Um, Glad you could join us. This is a really wonderful opportunity to connect with not only the World Affairs Council of Connecticut, but our colleagues across the network of the World Affairs Councils of America. And we are here helping keep these kinds of discussions vibrant and front and center for you. So with us today, we have Ambassador Charles Shapiro, retired, a career Foreign Service officer with 34 years of service. He held a number of senior positions at the U.S. Department of State. And for our particular program today, chiefly he was ambassador to Venezuela, as well as acting assistant secretary for the Western Hemisphere and coordinator for Cuban Affairs. In addition, for many years, he was the president of the World Affairs Council of Atlanta, so he knows of which we speak when we try and bring people together to talk about all the ideas in our midst. So without any further ado, I'm going to bring on my friend Megan Torrey, and I'm very, very happy, Charles, that you could be doing this program with us today.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Tim. Ambassador Shapiro, Charles, it's such an honor to have you with us here tonight.
Well, it's great fun. I'm delighted to be here, and I'm thankful to you, to World Connecticut, and to all the World Affairs Councils who are on the program tonight. So thank you so much.
Such an important topic. When we discussed doing this, what was it, a few weeks ago, we thought, yeah, it's definitely timely. It seems to be getting timelier and timelier by the minute, right? So I really do want to jump right in. These tensions between the U.S. and in Venezuela seem to be quickly developing. We know that even just today, there were, two F-18s over Venezuelan airspace for about 40 minutes. The current status of the conflict is quickly escalating. And I'm wondering if you can sort of baseline where we are at today.
Okay, thanks, Megan. And first of all, I mean, the timing is perfect. Tomorrow night in Oslo, Maria Corina Machado receives the Nobel Peace Prize. And so all this is tying together. And, it certainly appears that the administration has, a huge fleet in place, and planes and ships and aircraft carriers and equipment on shore in Puerto Rico, and planes flying in from continental United States. So the military piece is in place. The President Trump said that he had talked to Maduro. I think it was last week, but at this point, it may have been 10 days ago, a week before last. And that they had a good conversation, but no resolution. So clearly, what we, the United States, are trying to do is to get Maduro to leave Venezuela, and to leave peacefully. And is he going to do it? How's he going to do it? What's sufficient? What comes afterwards? Those are all the big questions that people are wrestling with. And actually, I sent invitations to a bunch of my former State Department friends, who I hope are on here, some of whom know a heck of a lot more than I do. So anyway, we got a lot of issues to explore tonight, Megan.
Excellent. I do want to remind everyone listening in the audience that we want to incorporate your questions as you go along. So please use that Q&A button. I see that someone has already submitted a question. Just please keep it a question and keep it short. So Charles, how did we end up here today? With our the biggest military presence or United States Navy presence in the Caribbean. How did we end up here? What's going on?
It's kind of interesting because people like me who are Latin America geeks, we always complained that the United States wasn't paying enough attention to Latin America, right? And that our military is busy doing stuff in other places in the world. Well, I guess our prayers have been answered, because now the president has ordered all of this military equipment into the Caribbean, using the pretext of fighting drugs, which I'll be glad to talk about later. We need to put a pin in that because that's kind of a cover issue. And one of the questions that occurs now is, why now? Why not 6 months ago or 6 months from now? And I'm not sure. I mean, I can't answer for the president and his team. He's not asked me for advice, but just to make sure everybody knows this. First of all, Venezuela is a big country. It's got a population of 30 million people. It's twice the size of California. For those of you from Atlanta on, it's 10 times the size of Georgia. Okay, I mean, so this is not invading Panama or Grenada. This is a big place with a big population spread out over a big swath of territory. Venezuela has got the largest proven oil reserves in the world. That means more oil than Saudi Arabia. They have, it's estimated, it's all an estimate, of course, 300 billion barrels, billion with a B, barrels of oil in the ground. And that has been the driving force of the Venezuelan economy since the 1920s. This is not something new. Venezuela has been a wealthy country. It's attracted loads of immigrants from Europe in particular. And it's got huge internal political problems, which I don't want to go into the background because it'll take me forever, and I love talking about it. Except to say that Hugo Chavez, who was the president when I was ambassador to Venezuela, was an authoritarian who rewrote the Constitution. So, it's like when you go to the tailor and have a suit made. He had a Constitution made to order so that he could run the country efficiently the way he wanted it to be run. He dies, and literally as he's dying, he has a press conference, and under this Constitution, the president gets to appoint the vice president. So he had a number of fire the vice president. He's a member of the cabinet, just like the Secretary of Commerce would be. And so he made Nicolas Maduro the vice president. He holds his last press conference and he says, "I'm dying. And under the Constitution, we have to have elections within 90 days of the time I die. And I want you to vote for Nicolas Maduro." Okay, so that, and they do. And that's in 2013. So he's now been president for 12 years, right? As they keep changing the Constitution and let him run again. And I mean, all kinds of stuff. Anyhow, last year in July of 2024, people negotiated, the opposition negotiated, the United States negotiated, and Maduro agreed to have elections last July. Okay. He, of course, thought he was hugely popular and that he would win. The Maria Corina Machado won an opposition primary to run, and then the Venezuelan Electoral Council, which is really in the pocket of Nicolas Maduro, disqualified her and said she couldn't run on some technicalities. So then they came up with another candidate, they disqualified her. So then they came up with this candidate named Edmundo Gonzalez, who is a retired Venezuelan diplomat, and like diplomats all over the world, not the most charismatic guy that you would find. And it was clear that he was the candidate, but that she would be the one running the campaign. And that if they won, that he'd be the president, but she'd be essentially the chief of staff / prime minister, whatever, but the power. Okay. She runs this amazing campaign across the country. I mean, really, campaigns from the back of pickup trucks because the government won't let people rent space to her to hold rallies. They won't let the people that rent microphones. So she's using a megaphone. And it is a message of unity, bring the country back together, bring the Venezuelan family home. All the 8 million Venezuelans quarter of the population of the country has left Venezuela. Freeing the Venezuela. Okay, I'm going to stop. I'm going on too long. At the same time, they trained election observers. So when the election takes place, the official observer at each polling station, what we would call the precinct, under Venezuelan law, all the party observers get a copy of the tally from that precinct. And so they train others, don't leave without getting your official copy. Don't leave without your official copy. And then as soon as you get it, take a photo of it and send it in to this email address, and we're going to be adding them up while the Electoral Commission is adding them up.
The background is so important, and I think understanding how Maduro is perceived in Venezuela and in the impact of his government is really important for us and as part of.
So real quick, I apologize. So the Electoral Council starts counting the vote when it looks like they stop and they say, oh, there's a technical problem with the computers, blah, 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 blah. And they just stop counting. And then 2 hours later, they go back online. Here's the final results. Maduro won. Okay. But they don't show, I mean, I'm sure in Connecticut, in Georgia, the Secretary of State of Connecticut, you can go on the Secretary of State's website and you can see your precinct, how it went, what the vote was. Mm-hmm. They never issue precinct by precinct tallies. They never issue them. I mean, it's like when your math teacher said, you have to show your work. Remember? They don't show the work. Meanwhile, the opposition has got the tally sheets from 80% of the polling stations. And it turns out that it's a landslide for Edmundo Gonzalez and that Maduro is killed. He loses by, I think it's 30%. I mean, that's unheard of, 30%. And he just steals the election. He steals the election. Carter Spinner says it's not a legitimate election. The international community says it's not a legitimate election. Everybody's pushing him. Okay, you need to release the tally sheets from the precincts. He never issued them, and he just goes on being president. So that's how we got here. We got this guy pretending to be president who's not the president of the country, not the legitimate president of the country. And so, how do you get rid of this guy? Is it the United States' responsibility to get rid of this guy? Venezuela's responsible? And that's how we got in this where we are today.
So as we sit here today, I think you alluded to it, but you said that, the U.S. is making this about drugs, and it's not about drugs. So what is it about? Is it about oil? Is it about Russia? Is it about the United States' motivation to control spheres of influence?
First of all, it's not about drugs. Venezuela does not produce cocaine. Cocaine transits Venezuela, mostly en route to Europe, not to the United States. The experts in the U.S. government estimate that somewhere between 5 and 10% of U.S. cocaine does come from, has transited Venezuela. And anybody wants to know why, just look at a map. Caracas is south of Nova Scotia, right? It's not like you just head north and you run into the United States. It's a long way away. Caracas, as I wrote it down, it's like 850 miles east of Miami. Mm-hmm. East of Miami. It's not the most efficient way to bring drugs into the United States. Okay, so it's not about drugs. And the administration has said these are narco-terrorists bringing fentanyl into the United States. Fentanyl is not produced in Venezuela at all, or in Colombia. It's coming from Mexico. It's not, so it's not about that. Bam. Okay, so let me take that off the reasons why. Is it about U.S. spheres of influence? I think that's probably closer. I think there's also part of it has to do with electoral politics in the United States. That Cuban Americans and the Venezuelans who are American citizens, and that number is growing, overwhelmingly supported Donald Trump in the last election. And I think in some ways this is a payoff for their faith in Donald Trump. There's also, and this is me, uh, speculating, but I'd be willing to bet you on this, is there's 700,000 Venezuelans in the United States under something called temporary protected status.
TPS, yeah.
TPS. That's when you're in the US and it's too dangerous to return to your own country. You may have come on a tourist visa. You may have come across the border illegally. But that we're not going to send you home because it would be too dangerous for you to go home. And this administration would love for those 700,000 people to return to Venezuela. And it makes it a lot easier politically if you can say, Venezuela, we got rid of Maduro, you're fine, you should go home. There's no reason for temporary protected status. The T in temporary is temporary, and that the temporary period is over and it's time to go home. Oil is, I mean, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. Clearly, U.S. oil companies would like to be doing business and resume doing business in Venezuela. When I was there, Exxon and Chevron and all kinds of oil service companies, the people that do the work, right? You don't come, the Venezuelan oil company doesn't do the drilling itself. It hires people to drill and to pump the oil and to run, do all that sort of stuff. I mean, they would love to do it. But you don't have to own a country to do that, right? I mean, U.S. oil companies are involved all over the world without owning the country. U.S. mining companies, we import, iron ore from Brazil and copper from Chile and Peru without having U.S. troops or owning Chile, Peru, and Brazil. And we have difficult relations with Brazil right now, but the iron ore is still coming. I mean, you don't need. I mean, that's 19th century mercantilism, right? That you have to own the place to exploit the resources. We don't need to own Venezuela to have U.S. companies invest. I mean, and one of the things, this is just me. I have one of the things I do since I have stopped, retired as a fact, is I've been teaching at university. And one thing is, the United States does not buy oil. U.S. companies buy oil, right? I mean, it's not, it's not, the United States does not buy, rare earth metals. U.S. companies do. So, that would be to the advantage of U.S. companies if they could be involved there. I'm sure they would like to do that. But I don't think that's the primary reason for them.
So what is the primary reason? Is it the oil? It's the spheres of influence?
I think it's sphere of influence. I think it is domestic U.S. politics. By the way, I don't think it's Russia. I mean, because on the one hand, we're if you read the national security strategy that came out, we want to be friends with Russia. It's not that we're opposed to Russia. And if you want to keep Russia out of Venezuela, the best way to do it is keep tied up in Ukraine, right?
Right. And so we know that, and I'm going to bring in a question from Steve Corbato, but I think it also ties into the new national security strategy, and also as we all await the national defense strategy, right? So Steve says there is some hazy thinking that has been attributed to Secretary Rubio that Venezuela will be the first domino to fall, with Nicaragua and Cuba to follow. Is this magical thinking, or is there solid basis? And how does that tie into this new sort of perhaps a resurgence of the Monroe Doctrine, right?
Well, they've been talking about the Monroe Doctrine, right? And President Trump's talking about the Trump corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, something which Obama, no, George Bush, somebody said, this is officially over. The Monroe Doctrine is dead. The Trump administration has revived it. There is a belief among Cuban Americans that if it weren't for Venezuela, that the government in Cuba, the communist government in Cuba, would fall. Venezuela ships oil almost for free to Cuba. They were shipping less of it. That's one of the reasons there are problems now in Cuba. I got to tell you, I go to Cuba twice a year, by the way. They've been hanging on since 1959, right? We've done everything possible to get rid of them. But if for a lot of people, well, if we do one more thing, that will be it. Well, you can't disprove that. Getting rid of dictators, whether it's dictators in North Korea or dictators in Iran or dictators in Belarus or you name it. I mean, it's very hard to do, whether it's Cuba or it's Venezuela or you fill in the blank. I mean, in an authoritarian government, the president controls the police, the military, tax revenue. We put economic sanctions on Venezuela and on Cuba and on other countries as well. And it's, the ordinary people in the country obviously feel the impact of that. But if you're the president of the country, you continue to live pretty well. And that's the issue. So that great, big, long list of things that you can do, the menu of things that you can do. If you're dealing with a friendly country, you can negotiate. You can figure stuff out. If you're dealing with a country that's a little skeptical of the United States, you you sit down and rationally come to a mutually agreeable solution. But with a dictator, it is very hard to do. And in fact, I'd argue it's getting harder to do.
So there's a few questions. I'm gonna by two people, and it's a question about is the issue of critical minerals. Is this or in Venezuela or any other country in the region potential drivers for U.S. designs? I am personally not fully aware of the
I'm skeptical
status. Yeah,
and I'll tell you why. Is that I'm no expert in critical minerals. Is that from the time you say there's minerals, in Megan's backyard, right, to the time, you buy the land, get all the permissions, get the equipment together, get the environmental stuff lined up, build the factory to refine it. And this is not like refining iron ore. I mean, it is very, very hard to do using centrifuges. It takes 15 years. And so, yeah, I mean, there's critical minerals in Brazil, there's critical minerals in Argentina, there's critical minerals in Canada and Greenland, and I assume there are in Venezuela as well. But, apparently if you've got enough territory, there's critical minerals there. If you've got enough square miles, right? So it's, how do you grab that? And are the critical minerals in Venezuela any better, more valuable, more accessible, more concentrated than they are in lots of other places? I don't know the answer to that question, but that's a long, long-term issue. There's an article today, I think it was in the New York Times, about how Japan there's 15 years to set up a supply chain for critical minerals that does not go through China. I'd urge everybody to read the article. Somehow maybe you can list it, whatever you send out afterwards. And it may have been the Washington Post, I thought.
So Charles, what do we think? Do we think that the United States has concrete goals? Is it regime change? What do we think some of the next steps are? We see continuing escalation. What are some of the options here? Is Maduro going to leave? Is that highly unlikely? Is the U.S. Are we looking at a U.S. ground invasion? Is there a world in which we see U.S. troops with boots on the ground in Venezuela?
Okay, so that's the key issue. I mean, we're down to the point, right? To the nub of the issue. I mean, I would love for Maduro to leave. I mean, you got a question, is it Maduro plus 5 people, Maduro plus 50? Okay, so you got those kinds of issues. You've got what comes next. You've got how do you convince the police and the military to shift their loyalty, not to mention the tax collectors and the people that pave roads. I mean, how do you get people to shift their loyalty from Maduro, the Chavistas who've been running the country since 1999 and have been pouring benefits to their supporters since 1999 to a new government? And if you're talking the Venezuelan military, a number of them have been involved in not just corrupt activities, but in both narcotics trafficking and probably more importantly, turning a blind eye, right? Letting stuff go through the roadblock, right? Searching the plane, but not searching well enough. That sort of stuff. And you've got the issue, if you're Nicolas Maduro, where are you going to go? Right? The president of the Philippines isn't he before the International Criminal Court right now? Right? I mean, so it's not like 30, 40 years ago where, dictators would go live, in Spain and a lovely place and take their money with them and live their lives out. The lifespan for ex-dictators is both the life is not as good as it used to be, and the lifespan is not as long as I think it once was. So you've got that issue. Okay, so we, the United States, are trying to pressure Maduro to leave. Is he going to leave? I mean, what would make him leave? Why would he want to leave? I mean, if it were me, I would have left by now, right? I mean, you've got these ships on right off the horizon, and you've got airplanes flying around. I mean, right off Maracaibo today, inside Venezuelan airspace. I mean, what makes you leave? So then that brings up the next one. Suppose he doesn't. Okay, let's call the bluff. I'm Nicolas Maduro. I don't want to go live in Cuba. It's a crummy. By the way, you don't want to go live in. Nobody wants. It's people are leaving Cuba, not going to Cuba. It's maybe it's okay. I mean, the former dictator of Syria is in Moscow now, right? Does Nicolas Maduro want to go to Moscow? I mean, he doesn't speak English, and he certainly doesn't speak Russian. What's he going to do in Moscow? So how do you get rid of the guy? Okay, so suppose he doesn't. Okay, let's just take that. What happens? My perspective, and this is just me, sort of trying to unroll it, is the United States does not want ground troops in Venezuela. I mean, MAGA doesn't want it, right? America First doesn't want it. The people who object to the endless war against terrorism don't want that. What I think is more likely might be specific strikes against military targets and inserting special operators to grab somebody, right? Which would be next. I mean, the first thing you do is you take out the air defense system of the country that you're attacking, in any country, right? So Venezuela's got some anti-aircraft missiles, I'm going to assume, and I'm going to assume that we would want to take those down first. If what the papers are saying is correct, I mean, Maduro's sleeping in a different bed every night. Is using a new cell phone every day, so you don't have that to pinpoint. So that's what's going on. And so how long does the president of the United States and his advisors, how long do they want to put up with that? When do they decide they're going to, if ever, that they'll going to use pinpoint strikes against Venezuelan intelligence, against there's Cuban intelligence operating inside Venezuela. The head of the Venezuelan presidential guard is a Cuban. I mean, they're people you could, people who know more than me and are more up to date than me, then could come up with a list of targets and people that you might want to take out, right? And does that make Maduro leave?
So, following that thread, there's a question here from Mark. What kind of pressure, or is there any kind of pressure, other regional governments, Colombia, Brazil, Peru, maybe Mexico, can apply to Maduro regime to transition to a legitimate government?
Well, that noise you made at the end is the right noise to be making. I mean, the countries that are the most influential in Latin America generally, and Venezuela in particular, are of course Mexico and Brazil. And Mexico is the largest country, the largest economy in Latin America. Mexico is one of the leaders of Latin America with a large population, and it is the most industrialized country in Latin America. And both of them have, as an article of faith, non-interference in the affairs of another country. I mean, they won't do anything publicly. Behind the scenes, they might, be giving advice, but they're not going to do anything publicly. And Colombia is not either. As a matter of fact, the president of Colombia, who is from a left of center party, a fairly left of center party, certainly has spoken out publicly against President Trump, the United States, and what the United States looks like it's trying to do in Venezuela. So if anything, he's going to oppose. What I think you'll find with much of the rest of Latin America is, you'll get a lot of Maduro heavy fans. Those 8 million people who left Venezuela, we think they're all in the United States, but they're not. 700,000 United States. They are in Latin America. Literally from Argentina and Chile all the way to Mexico. There's 1 million Venezuelans in Colombia that are, to their credit, Colombians are teaching them in their schools and giving them health care. But it means, your child's classroom suddenly has these Venezuelan students in it, and you don't have enough teachers, right? It means the hospitals are being stressed. It means you've got, I certainly saw it in Colombia last time I was there. You've got beggars, Venezuelan beggars in the streets, right? Prostitution in Colombia and Trinidad with Venezuelan, so they're experiencing a great deal of social pressure caused by the instability in Venezuela. And so while, you subtract Mexico and Brazil and Colombia, but the other countries, they'll be critical of any intervention publicly, but not privately. I don't think they will not be sad to see Maduro go at all.
So I have a question here from David Goldberg, or David from Boston. Doesn't Russia have a say in matters relating to Venezuela? So I think the question is in essence about what stake does Russia have in Venezuela? Do you think that Russia would just stand by if the US were to invade?
Well, that's what it's doing right now. Both Russia and China are like keeping quiet. I said, it's kind of an offhand comment that Russia is tied up in Ukraine. Let me stress that, Russia is tied up in Ukraine. And what we forget is that the Russian economy is smaller than the economy of Italy. It's slightly larger than the economy of Spain and smaller than the economy of Italy. Okay? They don't have the resources, financial resources, and they don't have the military equipment to do anything in Venezuela. They do like a once a year, a Russian ship will go to Venezuela, and once a year, I think it's 2 bombers, supersonic bombers fly in and stay for a few days and then leave. That's what's called waving the flag. They don't have the wherewithal to support Venezuela. They don't have the wherewithal to support Cuba, who's much closer to them and tied to them much more tightly. The Chinese have made loans to all across Latin America. The Chinese make loans. They do infrastructure projects. They just a great big project in Peru that they just completed, a huge port. They'll help people build roads, but they expect to be paid back. They're not giving anything away. They expect to be paid back. And by the way, they are paid back because they insist on it. And so far as I know, other than, sort of military attachés at embassies and the possibility of a Chinese listening station of electronic signals intelligence station in Cuba, there's so far as I know, there's no Chinese troops in Latin America anywhere.
So here's a question from another David, a different David. Given the fact that there has been sort of this, I guess, a mobilization of military in Venezuela, as you stated, is there a percentage of the military, or is there a portion of the military that would welcome a new government? Do you see a possibility of a coup?
I don't know the answer to that question, and I don't know who does. I mean, for 25 years, I've been hearing that there's portions of the Venezuelan military are unhappy with what's going on, and they're going to get rid of the government. And I've never seen any evidence of that. Is it wishful thinking? Is it, hopium, as they say, or is it real? And I mean, listen, Venezuelans, the Venezuelan opposition, the people that voted for Edmundo Gonzalez are desperate. I mean, they've seen their country be destroyed for the past 25 years. Their economy's been destroyed. Their children have left the country because there's no future in the country, right? I mean, they're desperate. They would love for the United States to intervene. And those people are also desperate to see signs that, somewhere in this unit in the Venezuelan Army or Air Force that there's people who are going to support a coup. It may be true, but all I've got to say is for the past 25 years, I have not seen that happen, although people have been talking about it for 25 years.
So there's a few questions, and I'll start with this one, and then we can talk when we can go to another one. But and this is from Alonso, I think, if Maduro would leave or decide to go, who do you see taking over? I mean, is it, what is the next option for Venezuela? What happens if Maduro does go?
Well, I think that's what people are negotiating, and I think you can. I mean, there's hints of that going on. If you read everything that's in the media about Venezuela, so there was some effort to get some sort of. And there was an article in the New York Times. These were the people who would replace Maduro, and they were all Chavistas. They all were people from Maduro's cabinet who, from my perspective, are just as hardline as Maduro. Right. So I'm not really sure what the advantage would be that Maduro would leave. One of these people would take over, and that then there'd be elections at some point. Maybe we'd move the elections up. So that's one thing that people are talking about. The other is Maria Corina Machado and her people are saying there was a regime change last year in the election in July, when the people of Venezuela overwhelmingly voted for Maduro to leave and for Edmundo Gonzalez and his team to come in. And so, we're not going to accept anything less than that. All of that is what's out there. How it's going to work out and how it ends up. I don't know who could give you an answer to that. I mean, clearly there are people who are proponents of each of those solutions. I mean, there's also people arguing that President Trump will just get tired of this. The keeping those, that's a lot of equipment, a lot of manpower in the Caribbean. Keep an aircraft carrier, I looked it up, costs $6 to $8 million a day to run an aircraft carrier, right? So, it's not like the aircraft carrier was just sitting around doing nothing. It was on missions doing other things in other parts of the world. I mean, how long are you willing to keep that military equipment there? Now, that can be an argument for action, or it could be an argument for inaction. And those planes you saw today flying around, I mean, clearly each one of those is an attempt to increase the pressure on Maduro to leave.
And so let's back up just a little bit. One of the reasons why all of us are paying attention to what's happening in Venezuela is the news. What we're seeing so much in the news is blowing up of boats, right? And specifically, mostly the September 2 attack that has been, so talked about in the news. And why is the U.S. blowing up boats? I mean, why are we doing this? Is this part of this calculus to put pressure on Maduro?
I'm not sure it's putting pressure on Maduro. If you had to, I think it. Let me back up a little bit. I apologize. In my youth, I was a member of the United States Coast Guard. The ethos of the Coast Guard is to stop drugs coming to the United States. And by interdicting the boats, search the boat. If you find drugs, you seize the drugs, you arrest the perpetrators, right? You maintain a chain of evidence so the drugs can be used in a court of law. And you don't kill civilians, even if they're criminals. Get my highlighter out here. Don't kill civilians, even if they're criminals. Unless they're shooting at you, then you shoot them, right? Unless they're shooting at you. We don't kill criminals in the United States. And we certainly, why would put international order? So this whole thing, I mean, the second strike, I mean, the first strike is bad enough, right? If the Coast Guard, just this week, there was late last week, a Coast Guard cutter pulled into its port on the east coast of Florida. Kristi Noem was there to congratulate the crew. They made a record seizure of cocaine in the Caribbean without killing anybody, and they had arrested the perpetrators. I mean, if the Coast Guard can do that, the U.S. Navy can do that. When I served both in Venezuela and I was posted in Trinidad, I mean, we worked closely with the Coast Guard, and the Coast Guard would put 2 or 3 Coast Guard personnel on Navy destroyers and Navy cruisers, because Coast Guard personnel have arrest authority, which Navy personnel do not. Coast Guard is part of Homeland Security, not a Defense Department. Coast Guard petty officers, sergeants in the Coast Guard, are trained in how to be law enforcement officers. So we put Coast Guard personnel on Navy vessels so you can interdict drugs. And that's what we should be doing. Whether it's first strike, second strike, this number, that number, whether it's in the Eastern Pacific or it's in the Caribbean, it's killing civilians. It's killing civilians. And lots of, I mean, the major religions of the world put that in the thing you shouldn't be doing is killing people, right? It's killing civilians.
As a diplomat, Charles, right, when you look at these extrajudicial killings, from your diplomatic perspective, and this follows up on a question from Amy, as a diplomat, seeing the U.S. doing this in the Caribbean, are you concerned that this sort of just gives license to, say, maybe China and in the South China Sea or other countries to do the same? Are we going down a slippery slope?
Well, let me first of all say that, it's what when you're at an embassy and you're writing the human rights report, one of the questions in the human rights report that you write about, every country in the world is extrajudicial killings, right? So, I mean, you got that to begin with. I mean, it goes against what I think it means to be an American, right? Secondly, I mean, I mean, what we do, it impacts what other people do. And to go back to great power diplomacy and sphere of influence diplomacy, and so the rules-based order for trade and diplomacy, I just find that is throwing away what has benefited the United States over the last 70 years. We are the wealthiest country on earth with the most dynamic economy on earth. And it strikes me we're putting a lot of that at risk by, disregarding allies, by the United States becoming a predator, by countenancing human rights violations, extrajudicial executions. And I think I better stop there because you can go. I'm getting too worked up. I'm too old for this.
So let's talk a little bit about from your perspective being a diplomat. You were the United States ambassador to Venezuela during the time of Chavez, as you said. How have you seen sort of the U.S. diplomatic relationship with Venezuela, maybe change over time? Is what we're doing now, a major break from the past?
Oh, using threatening military force is a break from the past. But other than that, I mean, look, Republican administrations, Democratic administrations, we have not had good relations with Venezuela since Hugo Chavez was elected. I worked for George W. Bush, was president when I was ambassador. And we had terrible relations with Venezuela at the time. To my great surprise, they actually managed to get worse. You know, I mean, that's hard to imagine, but in fact, it happened. I mean, not now, I'm talking about in the intervening years. I have to tell you, I met Nicolas Maduro once, but with a bunch of congressmen who were visiting, but only once because he would not meet with me. We had a mutual friend, would be too strong a word, but a contact, a guy who was a backbencher in the National Assembly on the pro-Chavez party, said I needed to meet Maduro, and he wouldn't meet with me because he thought I was from the CIA and I would, somehow trick him or plant something in his molar, or I don't know what that would change him, and so he wouldn't meet alone with me. Even stood me up once. He wouldn't come to the U.S. Embassy or to my house. He certainly didn't want me going to his house. I was supposed to meet him in the bar at a hotel, and he wouldn't meet me at the bar at a hotel. How's that? I'm surprised he's still in power because I did not know that he would be be strong enough to stay in power this long, because he's got a whole bunch of Chavistas who are more conniving, more venal, more brutal than he is. And I would have thought he'd been dumped by now, and one of them would have taken over.
So here's a question from Jess about Maria Machado. She says, on one hand, she's an advocate for peaceful democratic transition. On the other hand, she's drawing a lot of criticism for supporting Trump and the use of force to oust Maduro. And maybe that's sort of exasperated by when she was awarded the prize, sort of made the overtures to Trump. Let's talk about that. And Jess wants to know, do you see that she might be playing a role in Venezuela's future?
I hope so. I'll just say that. Okay, I know her. I don't know her well. I mean, she was just getting started in politics when I was there. I mean, and I had, met with her in my office. She came in with a bunch of people, to talk about something. And I had no idea that this woman would be a Nobel Peace Prize winner, 20 years later. She is remarkable. What you see in her and her willingness to countenance, a possible military intervention by the United States is extraordinary frustration. That we've tried everything. We had elections and the guy stole the election and didn't even bother to cover up the steal. I mean, that's how bold-faced it was. So, she got elected to the National Assembly. The Chavistas in the Assembly literally broke her nose. I mean, they beat her up on the floor of the Assembly, right? And she is emblematic of millions of Venezuelans who would do anything to get rid of Maduro, including asking for the United States to invade their country. And so, I mean, I understand that. I understand it. I mean, it's just intense. I mean, at wit's end. We've done everything. We've tried everything. We've done everything y'all told us to do, and it has not worked. We need you to do it.
So, as our time is starting to draw to a close, when we look at, the potential, military conflict or all of these tensions between the U.S. in Venezuela, what, in a month, in a year, in 6 months, in 5 years, what do you think could be the outcome? What do you think is going to happen?
Look, I can't answer that question, but let me go back to what I think what we need to be doing instead of talking about, claiming that these guys are narco-terrorists. I mean, they're narcotics traffickers. What we need to be talking about, we need to be discussing do we, the American people, do we want the United States to use military force in Venezuela? Do we want U.S. military on the ground in Venezuela? Suppose that transition isn't as smooth as the opposition, the people around Maria Corina Machado think it will be. Suppose you need an occupation force, right? You need to do nation building, the thing that the Trump administration says they will never, ever do, right? Venezuela needs nation. Do we want to do that? Do we want to assume that responsibility? Do we want to assume the cost of rebuilding the court system, rebuilding the universities, of rebuilding the healthcare system in this country? Do we want to have our sons and daughters in the military in Venezuela? And that's what we ought to be talking about. Not, should we be blowing up boats or not? Which, by the way, we should not be blowing up boats. And that is why we elect our representatives to Congress. That's who ought to be discussing this. I mean, people who know what they're talking about on the Armed Services Committees and the Foreign Relations Committees and the Intelligence Committees, that we ought to be discussing this, and we are not. This smokescreen about that it's all about stopping people from killing American citizens with dangerous drugs. That's a dead end. That's not what we need to be discussing. We need our members of Congress from all the, what did you say? There's 20 World Affairs Councils on from all 20 states represented here, need to be talking about that, both for and against, Republicans and Democrats.
Absolutely. So we always give our speaker the last word. I'll ask you two questions. Any other last words about Venezuela? And then I'm going to ask you something else.
I mean, that's my last word. Is we need to think seriously. It's amazing how, I mean, if you're on social media, which I spend way too much time I'm a retired guy, so I can spend time doing that. That we have people who overnight are experts on Venezuela, overnight experts on Greenland, experts on Chinese weather balloons, who know exactly what the United States should and should not be doing. I mean, this is one of these issues where we need people who know what they're talking about. Republicans and Democrats, supporters of the president, opponents of the president, need to be discussing this, and need to be discussing it seriously, need to be discussing it in the United States Congress and in our newspapers and at World Affairs Councils across the United States. We need to be talking about, do we want to take that responsibility on? It's understandable that Venezuelans want us to do it. Do Venezuela be better off after U.S. intervention? Do we want to do it? Is that our responsibility? We want to spend the money for it. I can make by the way, I can make the argument both ways, Megan. So, but that's what we need to talk about.
Absolutely. So Charles, thank you so much. As you know, you are our last speaker up for our public programs in 2025. And we're so honored to have you. And you have always been a guiding light for all of us as councils. And, so as we close out a year that has been full of great change, and as we enter a year with a lot of uncertainty, as the future is always uncertain, I'm wondering if you could share sort of your end of the year, going into a new year message with us.
Oh, goodness. I think next year is going to be more complicated than this year. As we get closer to midterms, the elections polarize a country. They don't bring a country together. I mean, you have to vote for this party or that party, right? That's what elections do. And both parties are going to be doing what they can do to increase that polarization. To say, my party's the right party. You need to vote for me because here's all the good stuff that's going to flow from that. And on the world stage, that's going to make stuff way more complicated. You're going to see the the impact of the tariffs going to become more evident for all of us every day when we go to the store. When you're trying to build a deck on the back of your home, when you're trying to do all the things that we do, that's going to be, we will see that. We will see this national security strategy that was released this week. That's what they're supposed to do, is start implementing it. It's going to be implementing it in ways that a lot of us are going to disagree with. And some are going to support. I mean, don't get me wrong. And that's why, I'll go back. That's why these World Affairs Councils are so important. And the work you're doing, Megan, is so important, and your colleagues across the country, is to get these issues out there and have people talking about it. So that we're no more than the headline in the newspaper. If you're like me, I love Twitter. I love that little short thing. That's my attention span now. I'm just flipping through them, bing, 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 without knowing the background to it, right? And that's what you do at World Affairs Councils. You bring people together to talk in detail with, hopefully, with people more knowledgeable than me, who can bring the background on China and India and Middle East issues and Gaza and Ukraine and all these issues that World Affairs Councils are worrying about, that most of our neighbors don't care about very much at all, right? And that's why this is so important, and that we are then feeding that, telling our members of Congress what it is we think we would like to see them do. There you go. How's that for upbeat?
Thank you so much, Ambassador Shapiro. Charles, and I hope to see you here in person in Connecticut, at some point soon in the future. It's such an honor to talk with you today and have you share your expertise on this complicated news. The news has been changing by the hour, and for you to share that with us tonight is so meaningful. And thank you for your words of inspiration for all World Affairs Councils around the country. I think we do have an important role to play to help navigate our communities and help empower our citizens.
Thanks, Megan. And thank you to all the audience members. I appreciate that. And Tim, thank you as well. Thanks, Connecticut. And good night.
Happy holidays, everybody. We'll see you all in 2026.